Hey, it's Kaero. Welcome back to the channel. Yesterday, Wizards of the Coast announced that with the release of the Wilds of Eldraine expansion in September 2023, the standard format would be switching to a 3-year rotation. If you're subscribed to this channel, you know standard is what I do. It's my format of choice, so this news matters a lot to me. And if you're watching this video, it probably matters a lot to you too. So, with that being said, let's do a deep dive on standard, the new rotation, and what it means to you. With the release that came out yesterday, the team at Magic the Gathering has stated they have 3 goals in mind for revitalizing standard, so we'll tackle them in order today. Number 1, giving current standard cards more longevity. If you've been into Magic the Gathering for a decade or longer, you've probably noticed a sharp decline in events in the standard format in your local game store, where basically 10 or 12 years ago, that was all there was there. Everybody has their own explanation or guess to the reason for the format's decline, but I believe the first and foremost issue is what's referenced here. With the card prices going up, players are reluctant to heavily invest in a format where the cards you buy today have a relatively short timer until they're illegal in the format that you have invested in. At this very moment in time, players are more likely to invest in cards to play Pioneer or Modern as their non-rotating formats, and their perception is that their cards, when they invest, will last longer there. That may or may not be the case because those formats do change and cards that are bought today may become useless with the introduction of new cards, but the perception is still there and they do not have rotation. My point remains that investing in standard right now, to the average constructed player, they will cite this as the biggest reason why they don't. And with this step, Wizards is correcting that. This move from them makes a ton of sense. They're basically saying, we understand the trepidation that you have about investing in the format. We're going to make sure that your investment is worth it and it lasts longer. I think this is a solid point and it's a great step in the right direction for revitalizing paper events in the standard format and getting those standard paper events back at your local game store. When players feel like they're getting good value long term and the good use for their investment, they will be more likely to play and invest in the standard format. The only potential downside here, as I see it as a minor one, that standard will likely have to be monitored a little bit more closely and bans may be slightly more frequent due to the larger card pool. And nobody likes it when their key card for their deck is banned. I totally get it. But ultimately, bans are needed and they are a good thing to keep formats healthy. So it is a necessary pain. Now, I don't speak for Wizards here and I can't speak for them. I'm sure that they do not like banning cards either, but this is something that happens in every format already, and calling that a massive downside would be hyperbole and exaggeration. Number 2, it will allow mechanics and archetypes to be more effectively built over time. Now, this part I am a massive fan of, and I will explain why. I remember when Zendikar Rising came out and it introduced the brand new party mechanic. I thought it was a really cool mechanic, but it didn't end up being very competitive in my view because the cards were not as widespread as I'm sure that Wizards intended them to be, meaning that there were party cards were far and few between. So you really ended up with this kind of like cookie cutter party deck. If you wanted to build that, you had a limited selection and it didn't inspire much creativity in the party mechanic. Having another year before rotation gives them the flexibility in the background to say, hey, we introduced this mechanic or this archetype last year. I think it's really fun. Players seem to like it. They seem to want more of it. So let's print more of those cards in the next set and then we'll augment that party mechanic or whatever that mechanic was, and we'll bring that from obscurity back into the forefront and make it more competitive and then give players more options that way. I love this idea. I'm really looking forward to Wizards having the ability to expand on that fan favorite mechanic or format over time. Number 3, it gives us stronger tools to create an environment where decks are more colors and mechanic, like green-white toxic or blue-white soldiers, and less mid-range. If you've been playing Standard over the last few years competitively, you know that the format has ultimately been sliding over to 3-color good stuff piles instead of legitimately different mechanics. We see this currently with Rakdos, Grixis, Esper using almost all the same cards of one color, to the point when you're building decks of these 3 colors, the bones of your deck are going to end up being very similar if you're playing competitive or you're concerned about your win rate. Now, I think what they're going for here is more fleshed out mechanics, more options, and seeding entire decks at once, building on past themes to make more cohesive deck strategies viable, instead of right now you want to just jam in every really good card at whatever point in your curve. So if you're playing red and you're not playing mono red aggro, you are definitely playing Fable the Mirror Breaker. You're definitely playing Sheoldred if you're playing black. You're definitely playing Invoke Despair if you're playing black. So without letting this video get any longer, I am very hopeful that these changes will improve competitive Standard and spark more paper events at the local game store, allow players to invest more heavily in Standard without fearing their investments won't be worth it. I think ultimately this is a very good move on the part of Wizards of the Coast, but I want to make it clear that though I'm hopeful that these changes are going to revitalize Standard in the way that they're intending, I'm not saying that there's not going to be growing pains here, especially on Arena. So revitalizing paper, I think these are all good with very minimal downside. In Arena, we're going to have like kind of a bit more downside and a little bit of adjustment because we're going to have to keep seeing Sheoldred and we're going to have to keep seeing Fable. But in any long-term plan, if we look at the health of Standard 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now, do we want to see it go down into total obscurity, even on Arena, or do we want to see it thrive? And ultimately, if we want to see Standard thrive, then we're going to have to implement some of these changes and we're going to have to make adjustments and grease the wheels of progress with a little bit of a growing paid period on Arena. So that about wraps up my thoughts on the Standard moving to a 3-year rotation. I am completely open to your thoughts. If you think it's a bad idea or I missed some downside or something, please do let me know in the comments. If you got something from this video, please hit that thumbs up. It's free. It supports the channel, helps me to bring you more content, and consider subscribing and clicking the bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Until next time, have a great day in the arena. Just have a great day in general.